PS110 artists, good to see you. I'm hoping I have all of my remote students and all of my blended learners who are also now remote students with me here today to make project number 4 called Texture Monsters. Oh yes, we're going to be drawing some monsters and we're going to be using a few different types of mediums. Mediums are the tools and the art supplies that we use to make art with. Okay, so what we're gonna do is first download on Google Classroom the instructions PDF. Read through that, getting a general idea of what the project is. Number 2, we're gonna download or look at the textures PDF. Now there's lots of textures. We're gonna talk a little bit about that in a second. Then you're gonna wanna download the presentation. Now the presentation is just a PDF with some slides that show you some different examples of monsters that illustrators and artists draw, and that'll give us some inspiration to make our own, okay? So let's talk a little bit about texture in our texture monsters. Miss Cascino, what's a texture? I will tell you. So a texture is how something feels. Okay, or maybe how it looks like it might feel, and the brain makes that connection when it looks at a certain texture on a surface and thinks about, I think I know how that's gonna feel because I've done that before. I've touched that surface. Okay, so there's animal textures like fur, which you might draw with little long soft lines. There's scaly lizards, which you could draw with little half circles all kind of bumping up against each other. Speaking of bumps, you could draw a bumpy surface that's wavy. There's also birds with feathers, and we could draw feathers, and we know that texture is soft. And spiky or prickly, like a cactus or plants that you might draw with some zigzags or spikes, some hard edges and sharp no curves, sharp points, right? Because our brain knows that if we touch that, woo, it's gonna be prickly. Okay, and then what about rough texture like sandpaper or tree bark? We know what that's gonna feel like. So when we draw that, it would be bumpy and kind of crinkly, and we might draw little bits and dots show the texture on the surface of the tree bark. Or if we were drawing something sandy, now sand is just a bunch of smooshed up rocks and shells, right? So little dots and bits and stippling, they call it. Artists call it stippling when you make lots of little dots. Okay, so that's another texture. Great. So download those things I just told you about and let's get working. The next part of the video is going to be me demoing, showing you how I made my texture monster. We're going to gather our materials on the instruction PDF, okay? See you in a sec. Okay, artists, I'd like to show you all of the materials I'm using before I start. I have some watercolor paper, which just means it's a thicker cardstock. You can use any thicker white paper that you have lying around, any size. I have a pencil that I'm gonna start my outlines with. I'm gonna trace or outline my pencil in Sharpie, so any waterproof marker that's black. I also invested in some oil pastels. Now these are $6, $7 at the local craftsman store. Totally worth the investment. Now you can also use crayons if you don't have crayons, any color crayons, because wax does the same thing that the oil does. It resists the water, and I have a cup of water here, in my watercolor. Okay, now these are just really simple basic watercolor, and we're gonna fill in over our oil pastels some watercolor washes, and the oil pastels will push away my watercolor. And that's gonna make our texture monster super special. So I'm gonna start with a pencil, and I'm going to start thinking about the textures in my texture monster. Now, you can just jump straight to the Sharpie if you want. I'm gonna do that so you can see what I'm drawing. A lot of people like to start with a pencil and trace their Sharpie lines. So let's see. I'm gonna think about different animals, creatures, objects, shapes, blobs that I can combine together to make an interesting texture monster. So let's see. I'm gonna just start like this, and I'm gonna make my monster have some feet, and maybe he has some hooves in the front. And I like the idea of him maybe having a wing, and I would like him to have some spikes right here, and maybe he has some fur coming off his back humpa-rumpa. And then let's see, he has a horn here. And I'm just making this out of my imagination. It's really fun just to let your imagination go. Nothing is wrong here. There's nothing that you can do that's not correct. Basically, it's your monster and you can make your little creature however you want him, okay? Now I made a little hand here. He's gonna have some claws coming out. He is gonna have some teeth. Now, I love the Where the Wild Things book is from Maurice Sendak because his monsters that he drew have so much texture. And I love the one that has the rooster head, the chicken head, with some feathers. And I'm going to draw in some feathers for mine. And maybe mine has some gills too, because he can go inside the water. And while I'm drawing, I'm also going to think about, what could my monster's name be? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it'll come to me when I'm done. Now my guy has some eyes and some eyelashes, and I'd like him to have a few nostrils here. They go all the way up because he's a funny creature. Okay, there we go. And I think he's gonna have, he does have fur coming off of his hump, some texture like this. He's also gonna have scales on his hump. Now I would spend a little more time on this if I were you. I'm showing you just some quick examples of different textures that you can put in. And I've made a lot of these texture monsters, as you probably have seen if you're in school with me. Now let me show you the next step when you're done doing all of your Sharpie. We're gonna move on to our oil pastels. Now oil pastels have a really cool magical thing, and we talked about it before. They repel the watercolor. So I'm gonna put in details with this. I am going to put in some little purple scales, some magenta colored scales with my oil pastels. Now I'm gonna pick a blue color to kind of color some stripes in between the lines and fins on his wing. And as I said, I would spend a little more time on this if it was my final one, but I want to be able to show you all the steps here without boring you to death of me drawing forever. Let's see here. Putting this in, and I'd like to show, maybe my monster has orange polka dotted skin that just kind of surrounds all these cool textures. Now I want to use the bright colors in my oil pastel pack. Maybe when I watercolor, his skin won't be so bright, but these orange will punch right through because of the oil repelling the watercolor. This is a watercolor technique that a lot of artists use. Now I'm just gonna add a little more detail to my horn in order to show you, and then I'm gonna finish this off camera, and then I will post a final picture of this on the lesson instructions, on the lesson plan. So, my brush opens like this. It attaches like this to make it a little bit longer, I think. Does it do that? Yes. Here we go. Now I'm gonna dip my brush in water. Now I don't wanna squish it on the bottom because that ruins my brush, right? I'm just gonna make it dance like little tippy toes. Get my brush nice and wet. Now, in school, we used liquid watercolors. Those are very vibrant and bright and work great too. I just have these at home. So home learning, you just gotta make do with what you have, right? So I have this blue turquoise color I'm gonna put here because I'd like to mix my color a little bit. I have these little pockets. You could do this on a paper plate too, or if you don't have watercolors, you can even use regular paint and just water it down. They should work fine. All right, so I got this blue color, and I think I want to add a little brown because I want it to be, oh, that was purple. Oops. Here, maybe this is my brown. No, that's blue. All my dark colors before they get wet are hard to tell. I'm liking the way this looks. Okay, and I'm gonna mix a little green with it. All right, see, I've mixed this custom color here. Now, every time I go to change my color, I'm definitely rinsing my brush here, and I know it's hard to see. I move it over a little bit. And sometimes I'll have a napkin, like a piece of paper towel to wipe my brush on if I'm changing from a light color to a dark color, back to a light color again. There we go. So now what I like to do is get my brush nice and clean in the water, and I'm gonna just paint clear water on my page. You're like, Miss Cascino, I can't see that. It looks totally weird because I can't see anything that you're doing. It's just clear water. This is ridiculous. Oh no, don't worry, because I'm gonna paint the clear water in all the spots where I want this color to go, and then just you wait to see what happens, okay? Because don't forget, the oil pastel is gonna push it away from all the parts that already have color. Here we go. Doing this. Okay. Now I'm gonna take this color that I made, I'm gonna touch it. Ooh, look at that. It's looking great. Putting the oil, the watercolor right next to the oil pastel, but look, the oil pastel is just pushing it away, and my orange polka dots are coming through just great. All right, I want it to, his whole jaw to be this blue color. Oh, this is so cool. I'm loving my monster right now. All right. So I'm gonna use watercolor for my whole monster after I finish putting in my oil pastel textures, and look for my final piece on the Google Classroom instruction sheet on the second page. Happy painting, artists, and feel free to upload your texture monsters to me if you like, and I would love to see them so much. And follow me on Miss Cascino's Art Room Instagram page, and I will put some of our school artists up there, their texture monsters, so other artists can see. All right, happy painting. See you guys later.